Hello guys, welcome. I'm going to just take a couple seconds to invite people on my profile because as you know, I'm live on my page right now, and a lot of times the notifications don't go out right away, so people don't know, but I do want to start in a timely manner too for the replays. So let me go to my thing and share this. So if you just bear with me for 1 minute, and I'll be starting. This is a really interesting topic because I've had this on my heart for a while to talk about this, and it's been a little bit hard for me because I'm just so passionate about this, and it's a big deal in my mind, and I've tried so hard to be very level-headed about the situation, but I actually encountered a situation that required me to make a move that was very difficult for me, and I'll be sharing more about that in a minute. Let me see if I can share this to my oh, okay, I know how to do it. It takes me a minute with Facebook because it's always changing. Share now. Okay, I'll just share it. I'm not going to put a commentary. So you can just see that I'm live. So now on my profile, you should be able to see that I'm live, and I'm live on my page. So I just wanted to dive right in pretty quickly. Thank you. I love you guys. And if you notice I'm not wearing a wedding ring, it's because in the move it got lost. And so I'm actively working to find it. I believe I left it at my mother's house. So no, don't judge me there. But having a wedding ring is very important, but I'm believing that I will find it. So pray with me that I find it. It's been a few months. I just thought it would turn up as we unpacked, but we're still not fully unpacked. So pray that we find it. So anyway, jumping right in, I want to talk about how I had to make a very important decision over a couple months ago that really took a toll on me. I had to pray through a lot with it because it was painful. As you know, I have been going to school, and I wanted to complete my bachelor's of social work and move on to my master's of social work, and then proceed to pursue therapy work because it's what I really want to do, and I want to use it for ministry. I'm not looking to have some kind of huge practice or anything. I just want the tools to help people in even greater ways. And I love education, and I love studying. I consider myself a fairly good student, and I love studying. I love reading, and I'm doing it all the time anyway. So I might as well go for the degree. And when the COVID hit, they were giving away these classes and everything else. So I jumped right in. And I hope my music's not too loud. I want to worship playing while I did this. I was studying and doing all these things, and then I was like, hey, they're offering classes. Hi guys, hi everyone tuning in. And I thought, I'm gonna jump in, and I already have so many college credits, and I went to school for a little bit before my massive testimony that Jesus did amazing things in my life, because I spiraled very down in my young years, and I never got the chance to go back to school because I felt called into ministry. So I went, and we just faithed it, and we just literally, like, people ask us, what seminary did you go to? We just studied constantly, and we did a bunch of different schools, but we didn't actually complete a degree. I didn't complete a degree, and so it's always been on my heart to do that. And for this field specifically, not necessarily for ministry itself. We've studied a lot and done a lot of internships and stuff like that, but with social work and with giving actual counseling and techniques and everything like that, you need a degree, you need credentials for that. Not everything do you need a degree for to do in life, right? So I'm not someone that is like, everyone needs to go this route, but I decided I'm gonna jump in. And in the process of jumping in for my bachelor's of social work, I chose a secular school, and I wanted that because I genuinely thought that I'd get a pretty even perspective across the board, right? I expected to encounter things that I did not agree with. I expected to encounter things that I did agree with. I did not expect a sort of indoctrination in a way. And so I was going through classes, and I would notice things that would tinge at my heart, and I'd just be like, okay, that's a little odd, but I'm going to answer how they want to answer, because that's how you get A's, right? You answer how the professor wants you to answer. So I did that. And I know a lot of you, if you're going through school or you have children going through school, may have to make those same decisions. And so I was sharing with someone about the things I was learning. So it's like, this is really strange, you know, like it's kind of like, I could kind of see where they're going on this point, but then this point's like way far off and everything. And so this person was just like praying for me and everything. And they were just like, this is kind of weird, you know, like that's actually blatant sin that they're preaching, you know, they're blatantly preaching or teaching against like Christianity. And you see, I understand that since our nation has a lot of Judeo-Christian values as the social work programs would teach on. And the problem is not that they say that, and the problem is not how they address that. The problem is, in my mind, that Judeo-Christian values and Christianity as a whole is being pinpointed for being the source of the problems in the United States. And while I understand some of the things that they're saying, you know, point by point, some of the things have a legitimacy in perspective, depending on the perspective you're looking at. But some of the things are very biased in opinion, very biased in a political stance and how they are training. And you have to answer, you have to like kind of agree to these things and answer to these things. And I just did not feel comfortable. And so when I started my next semester, so I got A's in the first semester, moved on to the next semester, and we were required to order books, as you know, that's customary. And so I ordered this book. This was I don't know if that's going to show up the right way, but it's A New History of Social Welfare. And so I didn't get it from the title because I didn't overthink it. But now, today, as I'm looking through, I'm like, I'm going to share, I don't know how much I'm going to share, maybe just one thing, maybe just the thing that had me say, I'm dropping out. I'm not doing this with this university. It just hit me today, like, oh, a new history. Okay. And so when we present a new history, right? So when we present history in a new light, I think it could be very good. It could be very healthy. Oh, my puppy is trying to get in the office. But it can also be, it's a big thing, you know, because you're now taking a whole nother perspective and trying to share that. But it's just, I think you have to be very careful with how you do it. And if Christianity is the source of the problems in America, why are there problems in other nations that are not considered founded on Judeo-Christian values? So there's some discrepancies in this theory that they have been promoting, right? And I can handle a lot. When I was being admitted, I don't know if that's the right word, accepted into this university. They knew my years of experience with mission work. They knew my years of experience with pastoral counseling. They knew that we were pastors of a church at the time and that we're planting churches and all these other things. So they knew all this and they seemed very on board. And what they really liked is our overseas work, which I haven't done in a few years because, you know, Rob's continued to do it, but I've been home with the children and working more locally. And so they were very interested, but they knew what I stood for. They knew all these. And so I was very surprised diving into the curriculum. And so when I was reading through A New History of Social Welfare, I was open to the perspectives, but it just seemed very, very targeted, very targeted. And I'll just read just part of it. These values reflect history, experiences, and worldviews of those who control the major political, economic, and religious institutions in the United States. We contend that those in power not only control the material resources of a society, but they also regulate our symbolic and internal lives in the influence of the values we endorse. Among those most basic of the values are Judeo-Christian values, democratic egalitarianism and individualism, the Protestant work ethic and capitalism, social Darwinism, the New Puritanism, patriarchy, white privilege, marriage and the nuclear family, and the American ideal. And while many of these have valid arguments as to where they have gone astray or where they've gone wrong or how they oppress people, I was very shocked at the stance that they took in grouping all of Christianity and Protestant into like a lump sum and claim that they're not doing enough on the social work. And they literally say that, and I can't find it because I don't know if I underline this part, but they literally say in this book that if Christianity was doing what they were supposed to do, there wouldn't be problems in the United States, which I highly do not agree with. I do not agree with that, because if that were the case, then what about the countries that are not, Christian? Is it because they're not Christian that there's issues in their nations? And so I just felt like Christianity was quite a bit targeted. But the thing that really, and you'd have to read through a lot of this. There's a lot of information here. There's a lot of one-sided. I'll just dive into the part that really, really I struggled with, that I knew I could no longer go forward with. And I'll explain why that requires action on my part in a minute. So here they discuss the New Puritanism as, of course, one of the major values that controls our economic system in this nation and everything else, right? So the New Puritanism, right? It is essentially political thrust of the religious right, a powerful lobby group for legislation to enforce compliance to the patriarchal and Puritan values of the past. Puritan values include chastity, particularly for women, honesty in dealing with others, abstinence, honesty in dealing with others. Okay? Yes, that is part of the Puritan movement, honesty. Abstinence from things defined by religion and custom as immoral, such as promiscuity. So this is custom as immoral because of what we teach and preach and believe, right? Promiscuity, gambling, and use of alcohol or drugs to excess, not just alcohol and drugs in general, but to excess is customary as immoral to us only. And proper behavior, that is behavior that will not offend others, which I don't agree with, because Christianity is very offensive, and I don't often hear of many good Christian teachers that teach not to offend others. A lot of times we end up coming off offensive. And I was just talking about this with a friend yesterday. Puritan morality also emphasizes the sanctity of marriage and the family and patriarchal authority in the home, and condemns lifestyles such as communal living and homosexuality. Okay. The New Puritanism is somewhat analogous to what David Wagner calls the New Temperance, a peculiarly American ideology that obsesses on sin and vice. It particularly contains concerns. This is coming to the part now. This is the major thing that hit me like a ton of bricks. Okay, are you ready? It particularly concerns substance abuse, sexual behaviors, food and fitness, and suspect freedom of speech issues such as pornography, lewd language, and content of music, movies, and so forth. He contends that this constitutes a culturally normative consensus war, primarily against the working class, ethnic and racial minorities, and poor people. The result of this is to further otherization of such groups and make them more subject to political control. And then he goes on to talk about the religious right, made up primarily of Protestants with a sprinkling of Catholics and Jews, uses modern technology in its battles. Television brings moral campaign into our homes. Computer technology enables immediate contact with adherents on action issues. This New Puritanism has catapulted people from the radical right into office, removed liberal incumbents, and sponsored laws and movements that reinforce religious beliefs on women's career and reproductive choices, prayer in school, and other moral issues. Militant on the side of domestic law and order, it advocates national insularity and military force to maintain it despite the interdependence of the world's nations. This is just really what hit me, because they put all these things as I'm gonna go over it again. It obsesses on sin and vice. It particularly, now this is what they define as what we obsess on, sin and vice. It particularly concerns substance abuse, sexual behaviors, food and fitness, and subject freedom of speech issues such as pornography, lewd language, and content of music, movies, and so forth. Now, while I do realize that there's such a variety of Christianity, like you really cannot lump it, because I know Christians all over the board, and that is within the Christian church right now is this law versus grace contention, right? So you know that not everyone is preaching exactly like how they're saying, but what they're saying is that because they're quoting this man, David Wagner, and they're saying that he says that it constitutes a culturally normative consensus war, right? Now this is by preaching a standard, right? So if we preach that pornography is not good for you, you should not be doing pornography, and unhealthy lifestyles, or even pro-marriage, like pro-marriage as a man and a woman, is oppressive to underprivileged communities, right? Let me see. I think that was over here too. I cannot remember but it does say that in this book, that it is oppressive to underprivileged communities. And then it goes on to say that because of the sex role socialization in the patriarchal model, right? So this preaching purity, preaching that we should save ourselves from marriage, preaching that we should stay faithful to our spouse, that we should commit to a spouse, that we should have children with a spouse and be lifelong partners with a spouse. Now, this is what this is addressing now, okay? So it says, because of sex role socialization in the patriarchal model, men and women are believed to have natural or God-given spheres of competence. Men are believed to be stronger. Okay, we're not going to talk about the physiology of it because technically men are stronger, but we're not going to approach that right now. More capable in politics and economics, which of course are my husband and I, apostle, is a female, so we obviously don't believe that that it's exclusive to men being in leadership. More logical and more independent, and so should control all social institutions. Not true. Their primary role is to support their families through paid employment, which both men and women work in our day now. Women are believed to excel in caring for and loving others, in homemaking tasks and helping the dependent. They are presumed to be more emotional, intuitive, and less logical, less able to deal with stress, more dependent, more blah, 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 right? A homemaker. Outside of the home, they should be caregivers, social workers, and all that kind of stuff, right? And that's not where I went to, but it just goes on to talk about the marriage and the nuclear family. Normatively, marriage is a social, sexual, and economic relationship. Is that what marriage is? Marriage is a social, sexual, and economic relationship in which a man and woman are legally joined and found to found and maintain a family. Sexuality outside of marriage is frowned upon, considered promiscuity and for women, but sowing wild oats for men. That's what they quote. And then this is the part that I meant to read before. They are equally strong negative values based on marriage. Anti-singleness is one, particularly for women. Paul says it's good to be single, so I don't know where they're going with that. Divorced and never married women, with a few exceptions, are also stigmatized. Even widows undergo some social ostracism. Heterosexuality is required, and fear or hatred of homosexual people, homophobia and heterosexism, is one of the strongest prejudices. Even though homosexual marriages are now legal in some states, also some family patterns such as communes or extended families, homosexual couples, or now non-married heterosexual couples living together without marriage are generally stigmatized by society. However, a decade into the new millennium, several new trends are emerging: an increased acceptance of premarital sexuality, with lone or serial partners hooking up or dating with sex as the expected outcome, being friends with sexual benefits, and cohabitation as an acceptable alternative to marriage. Additionally, childbearing before marriage no longer seems to hold much stigma either for the mother or child, and a trend toward marriage after children are born is emerging. For many young people, these trends appear not only acceptable, but as proper steps in independence in life. And I remember growing up in New Jersey, and we had a sex ed class where we were taught that we should date several kinds of people, both men and women, and that this is what was taught as normal and what was taught as healthy. And I remember thinking, it's odd, I don't think I can do that. So this was happening when I was in school. When I was in middle school, 8th grade, to be honest. And then now I'm in college at 34, and I'm reading all these things, and I'm thinking, wow, how far we've come, that the whole social work practice has based Judeo-Christian values is not just the perspectives that need to grow and change, but that they're the source of the problem. And that was really, really difficult for me to read that it's oppressive and it's a problem. It contends in a culturally normative consensus war if we hold people to a standard and teach them what's good for them, teach them what's healthy for them from God's perspective. So that kind of boxes us in my sense, in a sense. And I was reading today in Esther. I felt to read Esther, and everyone talks about Esther's obedience that solidified God's plan with favor on her life, right? So it was Esther's obedience. And you could see God's favor on her life, because literally she was like, I'm going to die either way, right? At this point, because Mordecai tells her, you're going to die. You don't think you're going to escape it. Like, they're going to kill you too, because you're a Jew. So they're going to kill all the Jews. So just do it. Try, go to the king's palace and try. And she does, and she has favor. But people don't often talk about how Mordecai's loyalty, despite his differences, culturally is what reversed the plan of the enemy, right? And so I'm gonna tie this in a minute, but I love that Mordecai didn't cave to pressure, even though he was loyal. You see, Mordecai exposed the plan to kill the king. And you know from later in Esther that Mordecai did not fully agree with all the laws of the land, right? He wasn't culturally part of them. He was Jewish. He didn't bow to, was it Haman? Yeah, Haman. He didn't bow to Haman. And that was a very controversial thing to do, but it wasn't like he was just some rebel for the sake of being rebellious. He had a cause and a purpose, and he knew exactly what he was standing for, and he was very firm in his faithfulness to God. He was very firm in what he stood for, but he wasn't belligerent. So he took a stand when needed, but he also was loyal. He was loyal to the king. He exposed the plan of the king, that the guards had to kill the king. And that ultimately is what reversed, right? So we had Esther, her obedience opened the door, but then it was the memory and the whole idea that Mordecai was loyal, that they could honor and celebrate him and give him all the honor that Haman thought he was going to get. And so we see that as he goes on, Mordecai cared for Esther. He went and checked on her. It says he walked by the courtyard after she went in to make sure, to see what was happening with her. And but he wasn't. He cared for her in a way that was real. The way he talked with her was real. And so a lot of times when we have to take a stand, it's hard. I've learned personally. I enjoy being liked by people. That's just something I struggle with. I enjoy being liked. So for me to take a stand on something, it has to be God. Like, God, just tell me what to say and what to do, because I don't like fighting people. I don't like controversy and all that. But there are times that God calls us to take a stand, and times that God calls us to be real. Now, he loved Esther and he cared for her, but he didn't love her in a way that just beat around the bush. He didn't just say, I'm gonna, sure, I'll just die. You'll probably be okay because you have favor with the king. No, he said, he sent this to the guard, the eunuch, back to her, and he said, listen, they're going to kill you too. So you're going to die either way. Prepare to be a martyr, and she goes back to him and said, okay, fast, I'm going to do this. And so she goes and does this, but it was his realness with her, his raw, his vulnerability, I'm going to tell you how it is, even though I love you. And he didn't want to see her pass away. He didn't want to see all his people pass away, right? So she goes and does that, and he was real. And so Mordecai, he didn't cave to pressure. He was real in his love. And he was obedient and fasting when it was time. When she came back, when she sent the guard back and said, okay, fast, I'm going to do this, he did that. But when the victory was won, he did not neglect the feasting. And he gave back to the poor, and he gave back to everyone else, right? And this is a true picture of God's view of how he brings restoration. And in my idea, this is the heart of social work, right? That that we would be walking by faith, and in that things would just flow from us, right? Because of Mordecai's loyalty, despite his differences, he still got favor. He still got everything handed back to him when things didn't look good, because the stick that he was going to be impaled on was already set up, but instead his enemy, Haman, got impaled on that stick himself. And so it just reminded me, because I was like, God, why are you telling me to read Esther today? I was like, everyone knows about Esther, and it's so typical for a female to be talking about Esther, but I knew I wanted to talk about this and why I transferred out of this university. And this is taught by Walden University. I love them. I love their school. I love the professors. Everyone was super nice. It wasn't overly challenging, but it was challenging to a point where I was learning, and I felt like I was growing in many other ways. But when it came to this, when they mentioned that what they lump Judeo-Christian values, Puritanism and everything with Christianity, and they call us the religious right and the radical right, and how we're infiltrating everything. And they're literally saying that by holding people to a standard on our faith, that we are constituting a culturally normative consensus war. And I just thought that's literally, you could say that same thing about a lot of other faiths. You could say it about Islam, you could say about it, but none of that is targeted. And I know that our country was founded on a lot of these ideas, but why don't we focus on like many in our church and in our group that we're part of here, they are talking about being a solution and finding a solution. And you're just not going to find a solution by tearing at what you don't agree with. You're going to find a solution by making better. You're going to find a solution, but yes, exposure, but exposure onto solution, as Patricia King would say. And so we need to be the solution. We need to find a solution. But as far as, I obviously cannot do a whole lot about the fact that this book teaches that they teach this, and this is what our children are learning, and this is what our children are going to continue learning, and it's probably going to evolve with the education system. But there absolutely is a political agenda with the education system that I couldn't say I'm going to be proud of a degree from this university. And so I dropped out, and now I just got accepted to Grand Canyon University. I'm so excited. That is a private Christian university, and I didn't want to go to a Christian university. I wanted more secular education because but I did not want to be infiltrated with a one-side bias that literally is part of the curriculum. In my opinion, a true education is giving out all of the information and viewpoints and saying, now you believe for yourself, or you search out for yourself. And that's how I like to teach too. That's how I like to preach. But with this particular curriculum, it was not that way. And literally making Christianity essentially the enemy, and I couldn't stand for it. And so just as I am loyal to the plan I feel like God has for my life, I want to get the skills used to help people. I would love to become some kind of therapist someday and help people in that way in ministry. I am not so loyal to the education system that I'm going to just obey every teaching that comes and answer those questions that way, because I am not supposed to lie. so in answering even the post questions weekly, I could not agree with these things. I could not say like, oh yeah, this is the reason why this is happening. This is the reason why our country is suffering and struggling, because it cannot be limited even to the extreme religious. I don't consider myself extreme religious. Like I said, our leader is a female, and this is not a controlling like religious atmosphere that we come from. But I do know that there has been damage done by the church, and so as the church, we can come together to make things better. We can come together to improve. And I'm not sorry that I know that they are teaching this at universities. I'm actually glad that I know, and I did want to come out with it. I wanted to explain like how and why things are, being taught this way. But really, I think that they've gone off. I do. I think that they've gone off. They're targeting too much Christianity and in one direction where that's not actually going to help either. And it's literally like a political, like I just went to school to find out who I should be voting for, really. And I'm not buying that. I'm not buying the agenda with that. But I hope that if you are in school, that you can come to a conclusion of what you can tolerate, what is loyalty and what is obedience, and how loyalty doesn't mean blind obedience. Really, it really doesn't. But and that's not in relation to leadership. Like when you have someone that that God has put in your life that you can trust and love, it's a little different. Like sometimes you will just listen to them, and even when you don't fully understand, and because they're helping grow you and teach you. But in cases like this, my loyalty to getting my education in this field is not blind obedience. And I cannot agree with some of the things that they were teaching and saying how when we hold people to a standard of marriage, and when we hold people to a standard, like especially things like pornography and wild sexual behaviors, like literally these things destroy people's lives, okay? Excessive drug and alcohol use. I understand that as a social worker, we are not supposed to judge. We're supposed to be a safe place for people. As a minister also, that's not limited to just social work. I've had to be that for many years for many people. And it's an honor. It's an honor, and I love that. I love just being God's hands and, arms and feet. And that's what the Bible says we're supposed to be. But at the same time, I cannot agree that preaching against pornography, lewd language, and horrible, things that we let into our body, like that's part of my whole thing. That's part of what I offer as a life coach. It's part of what I offer as a pastoral counselor, that, to, yes, be mindful of what you're letting in your life. Yes, be mindful of what you're letting in your kids' lives and what you're believing. And it's all part of what forms our beliefs, is what we expose ourselves to. And so, yes, I will continue to say, do not watch pornography. And yes, it is, God did ordain marriage as a man and a woman. And yes, abortion is not of God. It is murder of babies. And these are very much things that I don't know if I could say if I get a degree from Oldham University, and therefore a degree from them is not that important for me. So pray for me as I move on to Grand Canyon University. And if you're going through college, or your children are going through college, and anyone has questions, let me know, and I would be open to answering any questions about this. It's taken me a while, literally months, to talk about this, because I was so heartbroken having to leave that university. I knew I had to. I knew I just couldn't handle it. I mean, this was the first chapter, the first week of the second semester of the program, and I was just like done. I was like, I cannot agree with that. But I love you guys, and I hope you were, that was insightful. I hope that I've brought insight as to what is going on. Many of you don't know. Many of you don't know what is being taught. And I do feel like no matter which way the election comes out, when an official leader is announced, not by a news media stream, but officially announced, I believe that no matter who is elected in, we need to realize that the school systems are purely political at this point. It's very political, one direction. And I don't necessarily have the answer myself. I just know it's a prayer point. I know it's a point of prayer and declaration. But a lot of, like last night, Larry Sparks was preaching at Shiloh, at Wind and Fire, which we go to. And he had an amazing message, and he was saying it's time to get involved. Some of you have not taken a position in the world because you feel like it's not full-time ministry, or you feel like God, like God has something different for you because it's a secular position. But we need people to get involved now. And like I'm doing with this degree, when I graduate, I wouldn't be closed to working in the secular world. I wouldn't be closed to working in a place, like if there's a position that's open where I can make a difference and stand for godly values in that place, absolutely, hands down, if God gives me the door, I'm doing it. But we need to not step away and think that our place is outside, like how many have taught, oh man, if we get too into the world, we'll get infiltrated by the world. And it's true. We do need to keep ourselves strong. We need to have a dedicated prayer life. We need to have a family, a fellowship, leadership, all that. But we shouldn't stay outside. We shouldn't stay outside or locked in our homes, looking out the window, just thinking, okay, yeah, we're not going to get involved. And that's how things grow darker in the world. And Patricia was saying yesterday morning, she's first, if you don't like how the world is, look at the church. The church goes first and then the world. So there's been a lot of grace versus law, and how much can we live? How on the line can we live? And how much debauchery can we participate in and still go to heaven and still prove, once saved, always saved, all these things. And I think honestly, it's all missing the point. It's all missing the point, because when you love Jesus, you don't want to participate in things that destroy you. And even if you fall into a time like that, God's going to call you out of it. I really believe that He's going to call you out of it, and you're going to be refreshed and renewed, and you're just going to fall in love, that first love that you had when you first, accepted Jesus, and when you first realized that He chose you. Okay, so I love you guys. Put in a prayer request below. If you'd like to sow into our ministry, we have a lot of needs with this transition coming up. You can go to glorybomb.com. We also have a new domain. I'm so excited. It's radosti.global. So I'm not sure if that's up and running. I'm sure my husband can put that down, but it's the same. Many of you know glorybomb.com, and you go check out teachings and resources and other things. I just was on God Today, and that was so exciting, such an opportunity to talk about mental health. I do believe there's a place for mental health in the church. Just look at Danny Silk and others that I admire, and I think that they've paved the way in these ways. They have, degrees and experience in counseling and mental health, and I love that route. I love it, and I think we need to talk more about it. So check it out. It's on glorybomb.com. My most recent little episode blurb with God Today, God TV. And then I'm also expected to do an interview coming up with God TV UK. So I'm excited about that. And I will keep you guys updated as we get settled. We just moved in. This is our office. It's pretty bland right now, but we finally got everything established. And I hope you have an amazing Thanksgiving, that you are surrounded by family. And of course, I pray that you're allowed to have family around, and that you're not only restricted by law, but by condemnation, that would be lifted from you no matter what situation, and that you don't feel alone. And I encourage you, if you are in a situation where you cannot go out, or it's a legit concern for you to go out, or the legal system, whatever, get on Zoom. Get on Zooms with people. And if you aren't invited to any, create them. Start gathering people that you knew or did hang out with. It's been so long. It's been months. Don't sit in silence. One of the things I put just yesterday or the day before on my page is that if you feel lonely, you're probably called to gather. You're probably the one called to gather others. And I guarantee you that others feel lonely too. Others are struggling with the same thing you are. I mean, honestly, humans, in a sense, from a science point of view, we're like animals, right? So we have the same emotions, so many of us, and a lot of times we're all suffering with the same things at the same times. But then what keeps us isolated is the silence. And so break the silence. If you feel lonely, if you feel like you're struggling, break the silence. I have a group, Planned and Purpose with Millie Joy. I'd like to create a very family-like atmosphere in that group where we can talk more openly, even regarding the lines of mental and emotional health. I love to talk about this stuff, and I want to share as I continue my degree. I start my classes again on the 30th of this month, and I want to share. I share things and resources that I get so that I can help you guys and what you're going through. And yes, there is some secular but never demonic things that I share that is just purely on the scientific mental health side, but I always line it up with the Word of God and make sure that God is always a priority. God is always the foundation of everything I'm going to preach and everything I'm going to do. And I pray that you are healthy and well and surrounded by love wherever you are. And I challenge you, start those groups, start those Zooms, and jump into my Plan and Purpose with Millie Joy group. Also visit glorybomb.com for resources or to give if you've been blessed by this ministry. Love you guys. Bye.